Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Gordon Choi. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. People who have left Hong Kong or plan to do so are dropped from the second phase of the consumption voucher scheme. 2 workers are killed when a working platform plunges to the ground in the mid-levels. And inflation and COVID fears sent the Hang Seng Index down sharply. The second tranche of the government's $10,000 consumption vouchers will be handed out in phases starting in August. The scheme has been expanded to include some non-permanent residents, but those planning to emigrate will not be eligible. Joanna Ho reports.
Adult permanent residents who received the first half of their $10,000 consumption vouchers in April can choose whether they'd like to collect the second installment using the same stored value payment tool as last time or switch to 2 new online platforms, BOC Pay and PayMe. Anyone wanting to use the new providers have 1 month to register online starting next Thursday. All those eligible will receive their $5,000 in phases starting on August 7th. Those using Tap and Go, Alipay, WeChat Pay, BOC Pay, and PayMe can get $2,000 on August 7th and $3,000 on October 1st. They'll have to spend the entire sum before the end of February next year. Octopus users will receive their handout in 3 installments by tapping their cards at subsidy collection points in transport centers and Octopus service points in Welcome supermarkets and Circle K and 7-Eleven convenience stores. The first installment of $2,000 will be paid on August 7th and the second in the same amount on October 1st. If the money in both cases is spent at the end of a calendar month, they will get the remaining $1,000 on the 16th of the following month. Octopus users must spend the first 2 installments totaling $4,000 by March 31st next year to qualify for the final $1,000. Permanent residents and new arrivals who turned 18 by today can get the full $10,000, while those who are eligible for permanent residency, including quality migrants, can get $5,000. However, people who were absent from Hong Kong between June 18, 2019 and yesterday will not be entitled unless they have a valid reason such as being away for study or business. Those who have declared immigration as the reason to withdraw their MPF funds will miss out. Financial Chief Paul Chan said the adjustments followed appeals by lawmakers. Another 300,000 people will benefit, while the cost of the scheme will rise by more than $1 billion. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
2 workers fell to their deaths when a suspended working platform collapsed in the mid-levels this morning. A workers' rights group called for a thorough investigation. Macy Mott reports.
Tragedy struck outside a residential building in the mid-levels shortly before noon. Police rushed to Realty Gardens on Conduit Road after the cable of a suspended working platform reportedly snapped, causing the cradle to plunge 20 stories, killing 2 male workers. Siu Sin Man, chief executive of the Association for the Rights of Industrial Accident Victims, said the 2 men were examining the gondola ahead of maintenance work. She urged the Labor Department to investigate why the inspection was undertaken 20 stories up when it could be done 1 meter above the ground. In the past, strong winds caused problems, but Siu said it was rare for accidents to occur during an inspection. She added that she understood the 2 men had 5 to 6 years' experience in the construction sector. Siu recommended that workers fasten a safety rope to their harness to prevent them from falling. The Labor Department sent staff to the scene to investigate the accident. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Police are hunting for 5 young girls who were seen in a video slapping a 12-year-old girl in Chunwan last Saturday. The footage, which went viral, showed the victim kneeling on the rooftop of an old residential building on Lunyan Street. She was slapped around 20 times in the video, which was reportedly taken by one of the assailants. The victim's father took her to Pokoi Hospital in Yuen Long to treat injuries to her face. He alerted police a day later. The iconic jumbo floating restaurant is set to sail away from Hong Kong this week at the earliest. Its parent company confirmed that the vessel has found a new home overseas, but refused to say where. Joanna Ho reports.
Hoardings have been placed on the entrance and windows on the lower deck of the jumbo floating restaurant. This was the clearest signal that the famous landmark is about to leave Aberdeen, which has been its home for the past 46 years. Its license expires in the middle of this month, and its parent company, Aberdeen Restaurant Enterprises, says a new docking space has been found in Southeast Asia. But the company said the shipyard has requested that the location not be disclosed to avoid interference in the operation and maintenance work. The departure date also remains a secret, but will depend on weather conditions. Chief Executive Carrie Lam had earlier suggested that the iconic restaurant be donated to Ocean Park as part of a plan to invigorate the south of Hong Kong Island. But the theme park couldn't find a third-party operator to run the business. The restaurant's kitchen barge sank a day after the parent company first announced that it had to leave the city due to lack of funds for maintenance and operation after shutting down for more than 2 years because of COVID. Despite appeals from lawmakers, Lam insisted that the government will not inject money to save the landmark, setting the stage for the curtain to come down on another era of Hong Kong history. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
Lots have been drawn to pick those who will get priority in choosing their subsidized flats. The flats on offer were heavily oversubscribed because they cost about half the market price. Macy Mott reports.
The Housing Authority drilled lots today to determine who would get first choice in picking subsidized flats. 250,000 people applied for about 9,000 units in 7 projects under the home ownership scheme. Those whose application number ends in a 00 will get priority to select their new home in the 4th quarter of this year, followed by 47, 08, 11, and 29. The other 95 sets of numbers drawn today can be found on the Housing Authority's website. The flats cost between $1.2 million to $5.3 million each, about half the assessed market value. Yunga Court in Chongqing is the biggest, offering 3,300 flats. It is expected to be completed by the end of September. The only project on Hong Kong Island is Kei-Wah Court in North Point. The 248 flats are the most expensive, starting at $2.5 million. But it is the most popular because of its location. The others are Kai Yan Court in Kai Tak, Kun Shan Court in Ma Tau Kok, Ngon Sao Court in Kwun Tong, Chiu Ming Court in Cheung Kwan O, and Yu Tak Court in Sha Tin. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Hong Kong's daily COVID caseload dropped today after staying above 800 in the previous 2 days. There were 737 new infections and no additional deaths. Among the latest cases, 275 came from nearly 200 schools. Authorities deemed an outbreak had emerged in 4 schools, including the Deborah Anglo-Chinese Kindergarten in Wan Po and International College in Northern District. The FLM Bar in Sheung Wan saw its cluster increase by 7, and the Rack City cluster added 3 more infections. The mainland is backtracking on easing COVID measures as case numbers continue to bounce back up. Beijing reported 51 new infections, mostly from a growing bar cluster in Chaoyang district. Authorities say one person at the center of the outbreak failed to do a COVID test for over a week, but still went to the bar last Wednesday despite showing symptoms. Lockdowns have been imposed on buildings where 10,000 close contacts of the bar cluster live. A 3-day mass testing program began today for Chaoyang's 3.5 million residents. Elsewhere, Shanghai added 37 cases and Inner Mongolia 40. Overseas, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators have hammered out a moderate gun reform deal. Although key demands from gun control activists were left out, the lawmaker who headed the agreement called it a breakthrough that will save lives. Winna Wrong reports.
Announcing on Twitter last night, U.S. Senator Chris Murphy painted a picture of triumph after a deal was reached. He called it a breakthrough agreement on gun violence, the first in 30 years that will save lives. Murphy and 19 colleagues, 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans, hammered out the pact. It includes funding to encourage states to pass so-called red flag laws that would allow law enforcement officers to seize weapons from people deemed a danger to themselves or others. It includes billions of dollars for improving mental health resources and school safety. The agreement aims to close the boyfriend loophole to stop those convicted of abuse against their partners from buying a gun. There are also efforts to prevent gun trafficking, straw purchasing, and enhance background checks on people under the age of 21. However, these changes are watered down compared to some key demands from activists, such as raising the minimum purchase age for at least some firearms to 21. A ban on semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazines, and universal background checks. Reaching the agreement was just the first in a number of major obstacles before the deal becomes law. It still needs Senate approval before heading to the House of Representatives. Still, Murphy is optimistic that it would break a 30-year logjam. The deal comes after a string of shootings across the nation in recent weeks, including one at a Texas elementary school last month, when 19 children and 2 teachers were killed. Winna Wong, HKIBC.
French President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance is likely to keep its parliamentary majority, but with a smaller margin. Macron was among the early voters in the first round yesterday. More than 6,000 candidates are running for 577 seats in the National Assembly, and those with the most votes will contest the second round this Sunday. A far-left coalition led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon made big gains. But extreme right-wingers under Marine Le Pen are not expected to pose a threat, as they usually fail to win enough support in the first-past-the-post system. Regional stocks retreated today on concerns of higher interest rates as inflation continued to drive up prices in the United States. Worries about COVID on the mainland also dampened investor sentiment in Hong Kong, with the Hang Seng Index losing more than 3%. Winna Wong reports.
Hong Kong led regional markets lower today amid concerns of further interest rate increases, as inflation in the United States touched a fresh 4-decade high. The Hang Seng Index plunged 3.4%, or 738 points, to close at a 5-week low. The tech sector was among the biggest losers, with Tencent falling nearly 5% and Alibaba plunging 8%. Investors were rattled after U.S. inflation rose to 8.6% and showed no signs of slowing down. The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates again this week in a bid to tame inflation. Investors are also waiting for a raft of mainland economic data. Fresh COVID cases, meanwhile, renewed concern about growth in the world's second biggest economy. However, one peculiar listing bucked the trend big time in Hong Kong. Koolearn Technology Holding, an online education platform, surged more than 100% before closing 40% higher. It came after a live streaming host mixed English lessons into his sales pitch for food products, causing his videos to go viral. Parent company New Oriental Education and Technology benefited too, jumping 13%. Winna Wong, HKIBC.
Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed down by 738 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent is down by $19.40, Meituan down for $13, JD.com is down by $11.60. The tracker fund is down by 78 cents, while Koolearn is up by $2.49. To the foreign exchange against the Hong Kong dollars, the euro is at 8.20, the British pound sterling at 9.56, and the Australian dollars at 5.47. Over in Europe, the London FTSE is currently down by 97 points. Onto the weather now. It will be cloudy with showers and squally thunderstorms tomorrow. Temperatures will range from 26 to 30 degrees. Expect the rain to continue over the next few days. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Monday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Gordon Choi. Good night. Good evening.